Happy Wednesday, Who Dat Nation, and a special happy evening to our Bayou Blitz family. I hope everybody and everybody's families are doing well out there. I am Bob Rose. I am one of your co-hosts to tonight's Bayou Blitz podcast, and joining me and welcoming everybody to the show is my partner in crime and my fellow co-host is Brendan Boylan. Happy Wednesday to you, Brendan. How are you? I see you're home again, right?
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. I was actually going to tell you that before we got on air. It's like this is the second consecutive week that I'm home. I'm home back-to-back weeks for the first time in a month. So it's cool. It's nice. Things can change, obviously, as the draft season comes. I hope I'm not on the road a whole lot because you definitely got some guys we got to preview. But I'm doing well. Hope you guys are. Well, you had 80-degree weather today, so I can't complain. I was in shorts after I got off work, so that's wonderful. But we got a lot to talk about. It's finally April, so it's officially draft month. Free agency has slowed down a little bit, and you expect that too. I don't think you're going to see any more splash guys at this point. You're going to have maybe a signing or two to kind of fill out the rest of the roster, but all the attention goes to the draft now. So we got plenty to talk about there, and I think it's an appropriate time to actually start grading, the Saints free agent class. I know some major publications didn't give them good grades. We're going to give our thoughts. Obviously, we'll get to what you guys wanted us to talk about, which is draft prospects, and maybe some guys we're looking at, and also just kind of recap what's going on in the Saints world with the draft, and a couple other things as well. But before we get into all that, I want to do two things real quick. The first, congratulations to LSU women's basketball on winning the national championship. They dominated all year long. I'm not gonna lie. I was really hoping for a all SEC title game with LSU and South Carolina because they played a fantastic game in the regular season. I thought it would be a fantastic final. Obviously, Caitlin Clark had her say in doing that and getting Iowa to the big game and played extremely well. So hats off to them as well. But LSU, you go get your coach and your coach goes and does some incredible work and realizing you have the pieces there to win, uses the transfer portal to her advantage. And that was essentially just like it's the equivalent of bringing in a great free agent class. Mm-hmm. That's what LSU did, and they go and win the whole thing. So hats off to LSU. And right now they're killing it in all sports. Baseball's number one. So LSU is just becoming the collegiate athletic capital of the United States out in Baton Rouge. And second, I just wanted to say, even though, I'm no longer writing with Saints News Network, welcome to Ross Jackson, who just joined the Saints News Network this week. Ross, I know you're in good hands. You're a really capable guy. You're a fantastic reporter. You've always been generous with your time and kind, and I know you're going to fit in really well with Bob, John, and Kyle. So welcome, Ross, and can't wait to see what you guys do. Can't wait to have everybody here on the Bayou Blitz at some point as well. Well, Bob, let's go ahead and start here. When it comes to the New Orleans Saints, I don't want to jump too far ahead, but let's go ahead and grade some free agency. This was a free agent class that was headlined by Derek Carr. Obviously, anytime you get a former Pro Bowler at quarterback in your free agent class, I think that kind of jumps you up the board to number one. The Saints go and do some surprising things and getting a guy like Jamal Williams to join the team. I don't want to say bolstered their defensive line. They almost re-identified their defensive line, at least on the interior. And they had a couple pickups here and there as well, including receiver. So overall, Bob, I guess I'll hit you with a flurry of questions. Favorite signing, least favorite signing, most underrated signing, and then overall grade.
Oh, wow. My favorite signing is Derek Carr. It's got to be because quarterback was by far your biggest need going into the offseason. I won't lie. I was kind of hoping that they would, get themselves in position to draft a quarterback. their quarterback of the future, specifically Hendon Hooker. Obviously, if you guys tune into the show on a weekly basis, you know that I'm a fan of that young man. But Derek Carr, I understand the logic behind the signing. I'm a fan of Derek Carr as a player. He seems really excited to rejuvenate his career in New Orleans, and he's been an underrated quarterback for mostly bad teams throughout his career. My opinion, this is the best roster he's going to play with, and I think that we're going to see a very, very good quarterbacking play out of Derek Carr. So that's my favorite one because of that. Most underrated, undoubtedly, Jamal Williams. Comes up close to Derek Carr. As far as my favorite. Because if you've listened to this kid interview, or you've interviewed, I had the honor of interviewing him at all, or sitting in on an interview. He brings an infectious personality. Not only to the interview process, but he's going to bring it to the Saints football team. He's also excited to be here. Is playing with a little bit of a chip on his shoulder. Felt unwanted in Green Bay, felt unwanted in Detroit, and talked about that. And again, it fills a huge need. You're looking at the not possibility, not probability, but the definite pending suspension of Alvin Kamara for at least 6 games. And even with Kamara in the lineup, as we've seen, as you and I have bemoaned week after week for the last 2 years, the lack of a complement to Kamara in the backfield has absolutely crippled this offense. You don't have that issue now. So that's why I think Jamal Williams, who, by the way, is coming off his first 1,000-yard season and is only like 26, 27, 28 years old, very much in the prime of his career, low tread on the tires, so to speak, which is very important for a running back. So I think that's absolutely key. I love both defensive tackles. I love Saunders. I love Shepard. So like you said, they remade the defensive line. Time will tell whether they're upgrades over Onyemata and Tuttle. But everybody that followed this team knew that the Saints needed to do something on the defensive interior. And at least on paper, they've accomplished that goal. I still think they addressed the position high. With a high draft pick, but Saunders and Shepard are going to upgrade as a duo. I think they're an upgrade in athleticism over Onyemata and Tuttle. Hopefully that does a little bit of something for that run defense. The signing I like the least, and I'll say the fact that they didn't sign a tight end. So it's not an individual player. It's the fact that there were loads of talented tight ends for the second straight year on the free agent market, and they showed no interest in any of them. I know they brought in Foster Moreau for a workout, and luckily for Foster they did, medically wise. But you're talking about Irv Smith, Hayden Hurst, Mike Gesicki, Austin Hooper, Robert Tonyan, Josh Oliver, Dalton Schultz. All those guys were available. All of them signed with other teams, and all of them signed for reasonably low contracts for their skill level. I love Juwan Johnson. I think Juwan's going to have a terrific year, but I think the Saints need to I would like to see the Saints bring in a complement, a more traditional tight end, two-way tight end to Juwan. I think that makes Juwan better. I think that makes Carr better. I think that makes this offense better. They had their opportunities and they missed it. So, like I said, my least favorite, is not an individual player. It's the fact that they ignored opportunities, at an underrated position of need. Having said all that, Mickey Loomis has done a fantastic job of keeping the players that they wanted to keep in the building, with restructures and reworking of contracts, including players that you and I thought were going to be out the door, without a doubt in our mind. And because of that, I think you have to factor that in to your free agency grades, and that's where these blind, deaf, and mute national media people, they're ignoring that kind of thing. So when you factor that in, along with the other things that I said about the free agency additions, I got to give the Saints, I'll give them a B. And again, it's fair. I'm on the verge of a B plus, A minus range. But the defensive tackles, they're relative unknowns. And again, the failures to address the tight end position, a little bit concerning to me. But I love the players they signed, they brought in, and love the players that they kept. So I give it a strong B plus range.
Yeah, I'm actually in agreement with you on a lot of those things. I do want to address the fact Foster did come back
Yes.
to New Orleans to complete his physical. It sounds like, at least for now, the plan could be for him to sign, end up on a reserve list, and then come back later in the year, obviously. And we addressed this a couple of weeks ago. He's got things that are much more important than football right now with his diagnosis. And but we've seen guys battle, come back, and play well.
Yeah.
But that part of it, that latter half of that statement, doesn't really matter right now. It's more about him making sure he's healthy, he's well, and he's in the best position possible to battle what's going on. So while it is good news for Foster that there is going to potentially be a future in the NFL, it's not the number one issue for him right now. Jerry, I appreciate you noticing it because I had it last week and nobody said anything about it. But yeah, I do have the Bobby Boucher signed by Adam Sandler in the back. I'm gonna try to do a better job because as much as we love Delvin Brawl on this show, I have way too many jerseys in rotation that I can throw up here of multiple sports. So I'm going to do a better job of just kind of throwing up some random jerseys for you guys and changing it up a little bit. But yeah, the Bobby Boucher is a cool one. I just got it. And hey, Louisiana ties, right? For me, when it comes to free agency, Bob, I think my favorite is Jamal Williams. And because Derek Carr, we had the hunch, right? We had almost the inside scoop that was going to go down. Didn't have no birds were in our ears telling us that Jamal Williams was going to be in New Orleans. And like you said, he's got an infectious personality. He's a big anime guy. I'm not going to lie to you. I have like one. I like Dragon Ball. I watched Pokemon as a kid. But he comes in, he's got like an Eevee hat on in his interviews, and he is a fun guy. And he's going to fit in that locker room really well. With some of those different personalities. I don't see a personality clash at all. I think it's going to be embraced with open arms. And if we liked the Mark Ingram and Kamara duel interviews, man, I can't wait for Jamal Williams, Alvin Kamara duel interviews. I think the top one, if they ever figure out a way to do it, if they could do Jamal Williams and Cam Jordan duel interviews, there would be nothing serious happening.
No, that's almost pay-per-view worthy.
Yeah, that's great. That's going to be great stuff. So I think that's my favorite. Most underrated is it's interesting to me. But I'm going to say Brian Edwards is probably the most underrated. And I say that because he may not have like an immediate big impact, right? He's not going to be number one. He's not going to be the number 2 receiver. Shoot, he's probably not going to be the number 3 receiver. But it was a position of need that the Saints addressed in bringing in another veteran guy, right? A guy physical guy that's going to compete and make other guys better. Because you and I talked about this the last show. Is you got Mike Thomas, who is expected to be healthy for camp, right? You got Olave, and you got Shaheed, who really aren't physical guys in terms of like size and stature, like a Mike Thomas or an Edwards. So if Mike goes down, Edwards, similar size, a little bit more physical than the other guys. And then after that, it's Traquan, Keith Kirkwood. There's a drop. As much as I like Keith Kirkwood, there's a drop. So to have a guy who has experience with Derek Carr, who was a good receiver in the SEC during his college days, and has had moments in the NFL where he's shown flashes, it is a huge depth move that I think is going to go underrated. And you look at these Saints offenses that have been top tier over the years. If you want to go all the way back to the Super Bowl years, it's like, okay, well, who is receiver like 4 on that team? And you're looking at receiver 4 was Meacham or Lance Moore. You can kind of flip flop who was 3 and who was 4. Vital parts of what the Saints did offensively. And you can keep going down the line. And obviously, that core was together for quite a while.
Mm-hmm.
But when the Saints were dominant, they were really deep at receiver. And some of that, you got to tip your hat to Drew because he got everybody involved.
Yeah.
But there are too many guys over the years that you're like, wow, he had an influential role on what the Saints did that year. And it might have been 1 year, right? Meacham came back and was receiver 4 at one point and was effective. Cam Meredith was supposed to be that and just didn't really happen. We talked about him in the last show. Brandon Coleman was a receiver 4 that definitely had his moments where you're going, ugh, but definitely had his moments where he made big plays. As much as Bob might disagree with me on this one, Traquan's been receiver 4, and there have been times where he has made plays for the team. You can bite your tongue. It's fine.
I am.
But nonetheless, receiver 4 is vital, especially in the offense the Saints have had over the years. And if you're going back to having a quarterback that you rely and trust a little bit more to throw the ball than you did Andy Dalton and then the mashup of quarterbacks you had last year, receiver 4 is important, whether it's going to end up being Edwards, Traquan, Keith, whoever it may be, if the Saints draft the guy, right? But it's just going to provide depth. It's going to provide some more battles in training camp. I think that's the most underrated. Least favorite is hard. I think I'm going to go the route that Bob did and kind of squirm my way out of the question a little bit. The inability to address the linebacker bothered me. And it wasn't so much we need a starting linebacker in New Orleans. It was we need a depth piece after losing Caden Ellis. So the fact that they didn't do that and bring a veteran guy in, they still could. There's one guy in particular that, I brought up LSU at the beginning of the show. Good friends with Demario Davis, is still a free agent. Rumored to be in contract talks a little bit last year before ultimately deciding to sign with the Jets is Quan Alexander, a guy who knows the defense, knows the guys. And at this point of his career, because of age and injuries, which are unfortunate, has to understand his role if he wants to continue his NFL career. And I think he'd fit in perfect in what the Saints want to do. Uber athletic guy, can go sideline to sideline. I think he'd fit in fine. But the Saints haven't addressed that yet. And that was a little bit of a concern. Honestly, Bob, for me, linebacker was a little bit more of a concern than tight end. And I think because Juwan had such a good year, I've spoken to the point of I think Adam Troutman understands his role with this team a little bit more now. And I think the fan base is coming to understand his role with this team as well. You have 2 young guys. Would you like to have a third veteran guy? Of course. And that's another position where we could go through the years and see Saints getting veteran tight ends. I was listening or watching something the other day. I want to say it was an Amendola interview. Danny Amendola talking about some of those Patriot years and talked about Who-Man being a vital part of what the Patriots did. And I was like, right, he came to New Orleans and it wasn't this big noteworthy thing, but he did make an impact when he was there.
Yeah, and Peyton loved him.
He was a great blocking tight end. He had a few touchdown grabs. I mean, just a versatile piece. That it was a veteran guy. You could definitely use a piece like that. So I get that. But linebacker, because we saw it firsthand last year, right? Pete Warner goes down. Caden Ellis comes in. He steps up. He plays that role a lot better than I thought he would, a lot better than a lot of people thought he would. And he obviously got paid for it. But if something were to happen, who's filling in?
I was actually going to ask you a question about along those lines tonight at linebacker, because I'm a little bit concerned myself. Matter of fact, I had them selecting Dorian Williams, the linebacker from Tulane, in my first mock draft last week. So along those lines, and I love DeMarco Jackson. I know you love DeMarco Jackson. But if you're the Saints, do you bring in a quad out? And you can only choose one option out of this. Do you bring in a Quan Alexander? Do you roll the dice that either Zach Bond is going to develop like Caden Ellis did last year, or DeMarco Jackson? So yeah, we'll call it the Bond Jackson combination. You'd roll the dice and stick with that, or do you address it fairly early in the draft? And by fairly early, I mean late day 2, early day 3. Which one of those options make you feel the most comfortable?
Getting a veteran, whether it's Quan or somebody else, and this is why, right? We talked about DeMarco Jackson being an undersized linebacker, but he was a tackling machine at App. And you know me, I'm a North Carolina guy. I love my North Carolina small school type of dudes. I mean, that makes me happy to see those guys succeed. But you really didn't get a true off season with him, right? Because he got hurt. So I think it's only fair if you take him, where you do in the draft. Yeah, it's a day 3 pick. But you took him there because you felt like you had something. Whether it's a future special teamer, whether it's a guy that could develop into being a good backup piece, right? And for me, to get a full off season with him and have another veteran there that's going to be running with him, on team 2 is going to be vital and important, and it's a good mentor piece. I would rather them do that and then whatever veteran you sign to a 1-year contract, and then be able to evaluate, okay, where is Jackson at? And then kind of go from there. Because I think it gives you the mentoring. It gives you a full off season to see where Jackson's at, not just mentally, not just, with the game slowing down, but where he is physically after an injury. And then you can kind of go from there. So that's what I would do. That's not the only right answer there, obviously.
Right.
But that's what I would do. And then finally, when it comes to total grade, I'm with you, Bob. I think the guys they were able to retain also has to play into how you grade this out. And remember, at the end of the year, we weren't talking about it because we knew how Loomis mathematics works, whatever title you want to give it. But a lot of people in national media were talking about the Saints had a list of guys that could be cap casualties. And, you had guys like Cam Jordan were on that list, and Lattimore was on that list, and Mike Thomas was on that list. Mike Thomas, I can't even. We've talked about this the other day. We are not the only people with eggs on our face, but I think most people thought it was a 99% chance that he was gone. And then even Jameis coming back, another guy that was 99% gone. Being able to retain some of those guys and retain some of the culture, and obviously all those guys are super talented. The fact that we're able to do that, I will be willing to put the plus that you weren't willing to put on your grade or you were a little hesitant to. I'll give them a B+. I don't think it was a perfect. Obviously, we both addressed, 2 positions where we wish they would have addressed. But they knocked some big things out, man. Looking back at last year, the defense was really strong at the end of the year, even with their inability to play the run at all. They were still really good last year. So to retain most of that and then go and upgrade quarterback, upgrade running back. If Mike Thomas returns, you upgraded receiver, right? If you want to look at it that way. You didn't lose any major pieces to the offensive line. They did good. Obviously, there are some people that are starting to take some more attention to it. Peter Schrager, who's always been complimentary of what the Saints do, did again this morning and saying they could be a sleeper team, not just in the NFC South, but the NFC as a whole this year. He said that this morning on Good Morning Football. So those are definitely some things to kind of pay attention to as we move forward. Before we get into previewing prospects and whatnot, Bob, this was the interesting one. It's popped up a lot more lately. So this is from our friend Brian. Saints are a finalist for Hard Knocks. And that has been a show where people have been, I don't even think it's 50-50. A lot of fans don't want their team on Hard Knocks. Obviously due to injuries the last 2 years, I firmly believe due to injuries the last 2 years, the Saints qualify because they haven't made the playoffs. Right? You make the playoffs once of the last 2 years, you're good. Mm-hmm. Where do you stand on if you'd want to see the Saints on Hard Knocks? And 2, of the other finalists, am I crazy to say that the Saints would probably be the most entertaining team to throw on that because they're actually going to be competitive this year?
I First of all, I think I think the national narrative is going to lean heavily towards the New York Jets if they get Aaron Rodgers, as we all expect. Because Aaron Rodgers is a walking daytime soap opera.
For the
But
most part,
as far as the team as a whole, I got to agree with you that I think that the New Orleans Saints would be the most entertaining for reality TV because of the type of personalities that you have. You have guys like Cam, Demario, Kamara, Jamal Williams, Jameis Winston. We know is a card. Derek Carr, his excitement to be in New Orleans, that kind of thing. Plus the controversy. Is Dennis Allen on the hot seat? Did Michael Thomas really have an issue with management or previous coaches or current coaches? Alvin Kamara's legal situation, Marcus May's legal situation. So there are definitely a lot of storylines there. And I'll tell you, if I were a player, I would welcome it. I would welcome the cameras being in front of me, especially if I was an established veteran and not fighting for my NFL livelihood. I'd have fun with it. But you know me, Brendan. I always think like a coach, and Sean Payton would have was on record as saying that he hated the idea. Dennis Allen, he's been pretty mum on it. But I know if I was a coach, I'd be like Sean Payton. I wouldn't want him anywhere around. I would consider it a major distraction, and not only to what I was trying to do with myself and my staff, but my team on the field. And it's just I want to be very focused, very businesslike. Have fun, but I don't need those stupid bleepity bleep cameras around me at all, let alone as often as they're going to be around. But folks, remember, these four finalists, for lack of a better term, whoever HBO picks, it's not like they can say no. The NFL 4 or 5, maybe 6 years ago, they set down a rule, saying that if Hard Knocks comes a knocking, no pun intended, you are not allowed to turn down the invitation. So whether it's the Jets, the Saints, Washington, or the Chicago Bears, whoever Hard Knocks decides that they want, they got no choice in the matter. And I know why a lot of fans don't like it or don't like the idea. Because a lot of fans are superstitious, and teams that are featured on Hard Knocks typically do not do well in the regular season. Try to ignore that. Players don't think that way. Coaches don't think that way. They just, if they don't like it, it's because they view it as an extra distraction. If they do like it, a guy like Cam, I think, would eat this stuff up. If they do like it, it's because of the extra exposure. That's the way the coaches and players look at it as one of those two things. I myself, I wouldn't want it because I would view it as an extra distraction.
Well, think about it this way: the NFL had to put rules in place for finalists because there was that many teams that were turning it down every year.
Right.
They couldn't find anybody to do the show. I'm with you, Bob. I think it's a distraction. For the players, especially borderline guys fighting for a roster spot, it's heaven because for two reasons. Because every year there's 1, 2, maybe 3 guys that are hard knock favorites, and they end up on another roster because of their exposure on Hard Knocks. They're able to kind of cash in on their brand, or they're cash in on their TikTok account, or whatever it may be, because they were on Hard Knocks, and they find more money that way. So some players are going to love it. I think for a team like New Orleans, who we've said on record multiple times, they weren't rebuilding, they were just reloading. I think one of the worst things that could happen is get an extra distraction.
Yeah.
So therefore, I'm with you. I wouldn't want Hard Knocks in the door at all, because of everything that kind of comes with that, because of the controversies when it came to Mike Thomas, because of the controversies everywhere else. I just wouldn't want any of that going on, to everything that you said and more. It's an extra distraction when you have a new quarterback in the room as well. That those are things you just don't want. It's not like the Saints had a lot of major turnover in key pieces, right? But they did have a lot of turnover in positions that are important, and the biggest one being quarterback.
Exactly.
And that doesn't even go to the coaching staff and all the changes in the coaching staff. It's one of the worst things that would happen to a team in this position. I look at a team. I've never really been a fan of Hard Knocks. I watched it one season, and that was the Cleveland Browns season. But with that, remember the Browns had just came off of a promising year, and then they stunk after the Hard Knocks year, and then they made the playoffs the following year.
Yeah.
But when you have a promising year and barely miss the playoffs, and I don't think the Saints had promising years, but they certainly barely missed the playoffs the last 2 years. Why would you want that? You're growing, you're building, the trajectory should be here. And when you have reality TV, and this is a personal opinion, I don't think anything good comes out of reality TV, regardless of what the show is. Right now, everybody goes, "Oh, well, Brendan, the NFL, the NBA, whatever sports, that's like the guy's version of reality TV." Yeah, to an extent.
Yeah.
To an extent. But the last thing you want is extra cameras. And to your point, anytime anybody talks about cameras in the facility, the first thing that comes to mind, because we were both covering the team when this happened, was the big news that of all teams, New Orleans was bringing Antonio Brown in for a workout. And what was the one rule that Sean had for Antonio Brown? I don't want cameras. I don't want your posse in here. I don't want any of that. I just want you to come and work out and play football. And what does Antonio Brown do? He brings cameras. He brings his people. He brings his media crew, his posse, whatever word you want to use.
It was Antonio Brown doing Antonio Brown things.
Right. And it was one of those like, man, could you imagine Antonio Brown on one side and Mike Thomas on the other? Like just in the that whole, and we talk about this all the time, like in Madden terms, it's like, wow. If you could get 70% at that point in his career of what Antonio Brown was when he was in Pittsburgh, the Saints were going to be unstoppable. That was going to be an offense that Drew didn't have to try to throw his arm out. He could literally just get it in the hands and let those guys go to work, and it was going to be a lot of fun. But that's what I think that's the added distraction.
Yeah.
And that's all Hard Knocks is. I don't want it to happen. Certainly, if it does happen, I do have an HBO subscription. I'd probably tune in just to see what happens. But I'd much rather go to another team. And I think you're right, though. The quicker that New York can figure out how they're getting Aaron Rodgers, I think the better for the other three finalists. We'll call them the biggest losers, the four biggest losers. The other three are going to be like, whew, once the Aaron Rodgers trade goes through, because that's where the cameras are going to be. Because shoot, the guy went on a darkness retreat.
Something.
Props to, I just gotta say, whatever company that ran through, I heard that their sales like skyrocketed after Aaron Rodgers did that. So way to go, Aaron Rodgers. You made some people some money. But I think, again, I don't know. I didn't really read into it. I didn't understand. But from what I gathered, I could do a darkness retreat at home whenever I want. Just call your power company. Say, I don't want power for 3 days. Turn your phone off, and then you're on a darkness retreat.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of what I gathered. But again, I do all my research. So
that's Aaron Rodgers doing Aaron Rodgers things.
Yeah, we just talked about two guys that just love the cameras. Absolutely love the cameras. Antonio Brown and Aaron Rodgers. Well, let's talk about some draft prospects for about 10, 15 minutes, and we'll get into dot or drop. I want to start here, and we kind of talked about this off air a little bit. So before we get into, because you are the draft guy out of the two of us, you hit home runs all the time with these prospects and guys we should look out for. But I wanted to address something that's came up a little bit over the last couple days in particular for New Orleans, and that is each NFL team's allowed like 30 official visits with players prior to the draft. And sometimes when official visits happen and it's not a guy that's on the national media radar or fans radar, they start freaking out. They don't like it. Why are they bringing this guy in? So I wanted to address that. And this is what Bob and I were talking about. Bob, please feel free to chime in per usual. When people are at the combine, whether it's people like us, John Hendricks was at the combine for Saints News this year, whether it's the media, whether it's teams, whether it's their front offices, whether it's scouts, whether it's players representatives, the list goes on and on of all the people that are in Indianapolis, right? I hate to break this to people, but very literally everybody meets with everybody in some form or another. It might not be official. We'll use the example of Hayden Hooker, who reportedly met with the Saints in Indianapolis. That doesn't mean necessarily that Hayden Hooker sat in a room with Mickey Loomis, Dennis Allen, and like the top dogs, right? That could very much mean that Hayden Hooker and his representatives met with some scouts from the Saints. That's all that means. Everybody intertwines. It is the biggest networking event in the NFL every year is the combine, right? And you'd probably be surprised how many deals and handshake deals go down at the combine every single year because everybody mingles, right? That's just how it is. So when official visits come around, this is the way I look at them, Bob, personally. Official visits come around because A, you met with them at the combine, or a scout or somebody met with them at the combine, was like, hey, we really need more information on this kid. We really liked him. B, that you didn't get enough information about a kid and you need to gather more information, whether it's, background history, whatever it may be. You're just trying to gather more information because he's on your radar and you didn't get enough information. So A, you want more information because you really like him. B, there's some question marks into character or whatever. You need more information. Or 3, or C, they didn't work out at the combine and you just want to bring them in, not just to talk with them, but maybe get them some reps on the field, see how they run, see how they move, especially if they're coming off injury, and all those things. And quarterbacks became notorious for not throwing at the combine to help the draft stock because of things like that. And then you can go to D. You're bringing him in on an official visit because you had an unofficial visit with the big dogs at the combine and you want to have a follow-up. There are so many things that could factor into getting an official visit. So Bob, I think I did a good enough job explaining that, but your thoughts on official visits and why people should or should not get riled up at those 30 names that are going to pop up over the next couple of days.
Now, you did a nice job. And don't forget all these prospects have pro days too. And a lot of teams and prospective draft prospects, they'll put more these days. They're putting more stock into their pro days than they do the combine itself, at least the workouts at the combine. And NFL teams, they all have the opportunities to meet with these guys at the pro days too on a more individual and a more intimate level. And it's because of all those things that you mentioned and that folks, you shouldn't get too worked up about your team is visiting with this prospect or your team hasn't yet visited with that prospect. Because I'll tell you what the teams use these visits for, not only to gather more information, and to sit down. There's not a more intimate type of meeting during the draft process. But having said that, all these teams, this is what we're going to be heading into the second week of April. All these teams pretty much have their draft board finalized. There'll be a little bit of movement at certain positions, based off of, medical evaluations and things like that. But other than that, most of these teams know what direction they're going to go or what direction they intend to go, 3 weeks from now. They use this as a kind of a preliminary scouting report. You're going to be facing A lot. Yeah. Say you exhaust all 30 of your visits, and there's no reason not to, because these are what you're allocated. Um, Out of those 30 visits, if you're lucky, you'll draft one, two, maybe three at the very, very most. And a lot of these visits that you're hearing, not only from the Saints but from others, they're guys that, if you do follow the draft or you do scout the draft, a lot of them are guys that are going to be going day two, day three, smaller school guys, and not smaller school guys, but guys that are a little bit off of the national radar. Why? Because the Saints, just like every other NFL team, they have draft picks in the middle rounds. They sign guys, undrafted rookies that didn't get selected. There'll be, and everybody else that you met with, the other 25, 27 players that you met with, you're going to be playing against these guys. So this is a preliminary scouting report per se. The guys that you don't draft, in 4 to 5 years, most of them are going to be free agents. You might have an opportunity to sign them then. And you and I mentioned on the air, Saunders, Saunders and Shepard, the two defensive tackles they signed this year, and several free agents that they signed in the last couple of years. These were guys that the Saints had pre-draft visits with. You get that box checked off, because now you're kind of a step ahead of the process of at least some other NFL teams that may not have visited with these guys. So assuming you have the same coaches and same scouting departments 4 and 5 years later, you already kind of have the book on this guy. That when I'm just grabbing a name out here, that when a Jalen Hyatt when and if Jalen Hyatt becomes a free agent in 4 to 5 years, you already know whether you liked him in 2023 when you sat down with him, and whether you're going to have any interest in him as a free agent if you didn't draft him. So it's that kind of thing. It's that kind of thing that that these teams use it for. Everybody knows who the top prospects are, and a lot of teams are going to be exhausting their visits on the quarterbacks. The Saints have already met with Hendon Hooker, like you pointed out. They are going to meet, if they didn't already today, they're going to meet with the quarterback from Houston, Clayton Tune. They'll probably meet with a few others. Why? Because the quarterbacks haven't been throwing at the combines. They've been throwing less at their pro days. So it's an opportunity to get to know these guys a little bit better. The quarterback, more than any other position on the football field, it's a lot up here too. You got to know, this is in theory potentially going to be your team leader. So you got to know what makes him tick mentally, what makes him tick emotionally, and you can only do that in meetings. The other positions you can evaluate by looking at on tape, and looking at on workouts, things like that. The quarterback position is just as much a face-to-face or an intimate meeting with coach or coaches. And that's why you're going to see the Saints probably meet with 4 or 5 different quarterbacks. I don't know if it'll be the top guys because they sit so far back in the draft, but again, don't be surprised if they do. And it's not because they think that they're going to have an opportunity to draft whatever player. It's because they're trying to expand the book that they already have on this prospective player.
Well, and remember, just to your point, is, and you can correct me if I'm getting people mixed up here, but it was Johnny Manziel or Baker Mayfield. But one of those guys met with Sean Payton one-on-one years after the draft. And the reports were not so much that they were looking to sign the guy, but that Sean Payton remembered liking the interview process with whichever one it was, whether it was Johnny or Baker, and he was looking to get some more information about where they were at this point in their career. I think it was Johnny Manziel.
I think you're right. Because
he had played in the NFL and in Canada in the XFL and the whatever the last league he just played in was. But just trying to see where he was at. And I mean, stuff like that happens. And you talk about even a guy of that caliber. Now, Johnny was, and we won't go on a whole rant on the Johnny Manziel story, but Johnny was one of the most talented college players that we had seen. And he had his off the field issues, lots of them. He had demons that only Johnny Manziel knew that he had. But even despite all of that and the lack thereof success in Cleveland, the drama in Cleveland, the signing for 2 days with that one might have been a little bit more than 2 days, but briefly having a stint in the CFL with Hamilton and then being terrible in Toronto and then getting cut, Sean Payton still went, you know what? I really liked the interview process with Johnny Manziel, and we might need a third string quarterback. So why not meet with him and see where he's at? But that's how coaches think. That's how front offices think. When you have a need, it's almost like dropping your resume off at a place. It's like, hey, we'll call you if we need you. And you get a phone call like awkwardly months and months later, like, hey, we're just looking over your resume. We really liked it. That happened to me a couple years ago. Like I say a couple years ago, I was probably in high school. I had applied for a job as a senior in high school. I heard as a sophomore in college back from the job. I was like, hey, what are you doing? It's almost 3 years later. But that's what happens is people remember seeing your resume or really liking you in an interview and it didn't work out at that time, but maybe it does down the road. So that's what these guys are trying to do.
And you know what? I think that's a great analogy. If you're the one looking for a job, you don't drop a resume off at just one place. You don't interview at just one place.
Right. It's everywhere.
If you're the guy hiring for a position, you don't interview just one guy, one person for that position. You interview multiple people for that position to find the best fit that you think that you can find. So I think that's an absolutely great analogy. And again, the Saints have done a great job at doubling back and revisiting, via free agency more often than not, guys that they have had original interest in, at least intrigue enough to sit down with a pre-draft visit for when they were coming into the league. So, they've done a great job at keeping these scouting reports. And, and again, Jeff Ireland, Mickey Loomis, Sean Payton up until last year, Dennis Allen and Pete Carmichael, they've all been with the Saints for an extended period of time. But one of the reasons why they've had this longevity of success that they've had, is because of this type of way of doing business. You know what? We either decided not to draft such and such a player or didn't have an opportunity to, but 4, 5, 6 years later when they're a free agent, you know what? We had interest in that guy before. Let's bring him in as a free agent now. We liked him then. We like what he's done as a pro. And we like what we think what he could do for our franchise, and they've done a great job of that.
And just one last thought on all that is look at people, whether it's coaches or front office people that have left New Orleans over the years. The first two that come to mind, Ryan Pace when he went to Chicago, right? And then obviously Dan Campbell, as he's the head coach of the Lions. Now look how many Saints they brought with them. And it wasn't immediate, all of them, right? Like Pace went and got guys 2 or 3 years later that he was a part of the draft process for, and was like, you know what, I really liked Hicks was a part of that went to Chicago and played really well in Chicago. And Pace went, well, I was on that drafted him. I really liked him. He's a free agent now. Let's go get him. That's just one example. You look at Dan Campbell, bringing why is the name escaping me? Anzalone went with him.
Oh yeah.
Josh Hill went with him. And it's guys that he had coached that he liked. And look what Sean's doing right now out in Denver and bringing guys that he drafted out there. And it's just a part of the business. I mean, that might be a little bit better of an example, seeing it, like actually physically seeing those things happen. But guys, remember, I liked this guy. I'm going to bring him where I go. Doug Flutie followed a guy his whole career, right? It was like an assistant coach that kept bringing Doug Flutie everywhere that he went. I can't remember the name of the coach. But it's things like that. You have one guy that likes you, and they'll never forget that they liked you. And that's just how it goes. That's the kind of industry that the NFL is in. We didn't even talk about draft prospects. We just spent 20 minutes talking about this is why.
Right.
This doesn't matter. So real quick, Bob, give me one prospect you've looked at this week that you really like.
Oh God.
I know that's putting a lot of pressure because you probably watched more tape than 90% of the national media this week.
Yeah, I've watched a lot of tape.
I won't ask Warren how much tape you've watched this.
Yeah, you know what? And everybody knows about the top guys, and I'm going to be asked about the top guys on this show and other shows too. Write about them. I like doing profiles and watching film study on guys that might go in the middle rounds or might be a middle round steal. Israel Abanikanda is a running back from Pitt, guy I absolutely love. Now, there's 4 or 5 running backs I would love to see the Saints come out of this draft with. Abanikanda is on that list. He's a big physical guy, but he has good explosion. He's not going to win any gold or silver medals in the 100-meter dash, but once he gets into the open field, he has pull away speed. He has the elusiveness to get away from tacklers in the backfield, and Pitt has had a lot of offensive line issues in the last couple of years. He was productive enough 2 years ago when the Panthers won the ACC championship, but a lot of people credit that to Kenny Pickett and Jordan Addison and his group of wide receivers. Last year, after those guys were gone, Abanikanda stepped up, and he not only had well over 1,000 yards rushing, but at times he carried the Pitt offense on his back because they had all kinds of quarterback problems, and I already mentioned the problems along the line of scrimmage. Abanikanda is needs to prove to me anyway that he could be an NFL caliber receiver. And another really alarming thing when I watched him, was his blitz pickup. But he has the capability, he has the physical skills to improve in both areas. And if he does, he has the skill set of literally an every down back. I'm not sitting here calling him a Hall of Famer or anything like that. But every single year you see 2 or 3 running backs that go in the middle rounds of the draft, sometimes later rounds of the draft, that really have an instant impact for their team. And I think Israel Abanikanda is that kind of prospect. And again, I do believe that the Saints could, and in my opinion should, draft the running back position or address the running back position more in the draft. It won't be with an early round pick unless something insane happens, like Bijan Robinson drops to 29. If that happens, by the way, hot take, if the Saints end up with Bijan Robinson on their roster, Alvin Kamara are having a chance to draft Bijan Robinson, they will do it, and they will trade Alvin Kamara. That's my hot take for the evening, but again, I don't think either scenario is going to happen. But Abanikanda is among the 4 or 5 running backs that is going to come off the board somewhere between midway through day 2 or early into day 3 that I think have the potential to have an instant impact on an NFL offense. Abanikanda is on that list.
There you go. There's your prospect for the day. We'll have more as the draft approaches. The whole next Wednesday will all just be all draft coverage unless something crazy happens and looking at different prospects. So real quick, we'll get to some dot or drop. We're talking about running backs there. Dot or drop, Bob, Mark Ingram on the Saints roster this upcoming season.
Drop. And I love Mark Ingram, and I have for years. I admire the hard worker, and student of the game that he's always been, and I admire and respect what he's done for the Saints franchise. He looked like a player that has nothing left to me. It has nothing to do with his last play against Tampa Bay. It just for the last year and a half. He's a guy that just didn't look like he had anything left in the tank. They brought in Jamal Williams. I'll say it again, I still believe they need to and should address the running back position further, but they need to do it with young legs. So no, I love Mark Ingram, but I think he's played his last down for the New Orleans Saints, if not as an NFL player.
Well, you have 3 on the roster right now, right off the top of my head. You have Alvin Kamara, Jamal Williams, Eno Benjamin. All 3 of those guys a lot younger. than Mark Ingram. Throw me the dot, or is it going to be a drop?
All right, dot or drop. The Saints absolutely need to draft an edge rusher in the first or second round.
Drop. And I'm crazy in saying that. I am really crazy in saying that. But I could see day 2 a lot more than day 1. But letting Marcus Davenport walk, not really addressing the position in free agency outside of bringing back guys that you already had, tells me that one of two things. And this is why this is an excellent dot or drop question, Bob. Either one, they really like a guy on one of their draft boards and they're really convinced they can get him at, 29, 40, one of those two, right? 2 is that you are all in on your first round pick from a couple years ago, actually turning into something. And you're putting a lot of pressure on him to become something. Because I think one of the worst things you can do, again, personal opinion, is doing what you did to Davenport by drafting Turner while he was still fighting to potentially be the guy there. Yeah, Davenport had a good year 2 years ago, had a dreadful year last year. I think the worst thing you could do for the development of Peyton Turner is draft another guy that looks to be taking over his position. For some people, that ends up being a motivational thing. For other people, it's they've already given up on me. So it could go both ways. So drop. I think the Saints still need to address it, but it just might not be this season. They might really go all in and say, "Hey, Peyton, if this is going to be your spot moving forward, show me. If not, this is the last straw type of a thing, right?" I think that's kind of where they're at, and based off free agency, that's where I think they're at.
Yeah, I do think it's definitely the last straw situation for Peyton Turner. And remember Cesar Ruiz, he turned it on in year 3, and Peyton Turner is coming into year 3. They absolutely need him to. And the way I termed the question to you was, the Saints absolutely need to draft one in the first or second round. I'll say drop 2 because I don't think it's an absolute need, because you still have Cam Jordan on the roster. He's playing at a pretty high level. I love Carl Granderson. They love Tano Passanio. They brought him back. They didn't even make an effort to retain Marcus Davenport, and there's still a handful of very intriguing defensive ends available on the free agent market that the Saints have not shown any interest in. And I think that right there is very telling. I used my first mock draft. I did predict that the Saints would spend a first round pick on Notre Dame edge rusher Isaiah Foskey. So I agree with you. I think it's a definite possibility that they go after one. And it's a thinner position than what we think defensive tackle and other spots look like. So if they do value one, it's going to be in the first or second round. But it wouldn't surprise me if they didn't, because, again, they've had opportunity, like you pointed out, they've had opportunities to bring in free agents and haven't. They had an opportunity to sign Davenport. Given what Davenport signed with Minnesota, they could have afforded to bring Marcus Davenport back at that price. Didn't have any interest in doing it. So I think both those things, I agree with you, are very telling.
All right, last one of the night. This is a fun one. Comes up every year. It's here the last 2 years. Dot or drop. Saints draft a quarterback before round 5, so they draft a quarterback in 1, 2, 3, or 4.
Wow. If you'd have said first 3 rounds, I'd have said drop. Now, if Hendon Hooker, I will throw this out with the asterisk. If Hendon Hooker is available at 29, I think it's going to be real tempting for him. But first 5 rounds, Alan Ulrich said last night on Under the Dome that he believes that the Saints are at the point of what other NFL franchise have the philosophy of doing, is they like to bring in a quarterback. Several franchises like to bring in new quarterbacks every single year. If you have your franchise guy, you won't do it in an early round pick or free agency, obviously, but later rounds, undrafted guys. And he thinks that that's where the Saints are at. I don't think there's any question that Derek Carr is the 100% starter for 2023 and 2024. I mean, they signed him to do exactly that. If he falters, they have an out that won't absolutely murder their salary cap after 2 or 3 years. But let's try to think on the positive side. Yeah, they certainly believe that Derek Carr is their guy. And I think that and again, unless a Hendon Hooker or someone they really love falls to them at 29, where they have that valuable fifth-year rookie option, I think that might be tempting to them. But if not, no, I'm going to drop. I'm going to say that they do not draft a quarterback between rounds 2 and 5.
Yeah, I'm gonna disagree. I think I could see the Saints do an Ian Book situation where you grab a guy in round 4. And with that being said, to Alan's point last night is it's like every year, Tyler Palko, Sean Canfield, Garrett Grayson's a little bit of a stretch because he was a 3rd-round pick. But you could go through the list of guys, and it was like every year it was like a 7th-round pick that the Saints drafted a quarterback that just ultimately didn't make the roster, or got a guy as an undrafted free agent, a guy like JT Barrett.
Mm-hmm.
The Saints always did a good job there. And then you had your exceptions, and Garrett was a 3rd round, and then the last one being Ian Book, a 4th-round pick. But I could see the Saints grab a guy in 4 or 5 if there's a guy that they like.
No, I say right. Yeah, and we don't know what the Saints board looks like. And remember, folks, you can criticize my mock drafts, Brendan's mock drafts, anybody's mock drafts, and that's certainly your right and your prerogative. Y'all don't know anything more or less than any of us, and none of us are making the decisions in that Saints war room. I think because of what we saw with Brock Purdy last year, and Purdy being a 7th-round pick, I think the Saints and probably every other NFL team are going to be looking real close at quarterbacks on day 3, rounds 5, 6, and 7. And that's on my first mock draft. I had the Saints grabbing Max Duggan out of TCU in the 7th round for that very reason. So I agree with you. I think that Alan, I think that the Saints do bring in a signal caller via the draft, but I think it's going to be on day 3. I don't think it's going to be any earlier than that.
Makes sense for my because Bob and I were talking about this before the show. For my collectors out there, card collectors out there, because Bob and I are both card collectors. If you have Brock Purdy stuff that's low numbered, signed, anything like that, get rid of it right now while it's worth something. And I mean this in the nicest way, because I think Brock played. I don't even think Brock played well. I think Brock did enough to win football games.
Mm-hmm.
Right? He didn't do anything outstanding. But the fact that the market is the way it is for a guy who's not going to be the starting quarterback next year is outrageous. So if you have Brock Purdy, take my advice. And if I'm wrong, come back and find me. You guys know how to find me on Twitter. Let me know that I was wrong. But sell it now, because I've seen outrageous prices for some Brock Purdy stuff. Just sell it now. It's not going to, because Trey Lance is still their guy. You don't draft a guy in the top 5 if he's not your guy.
Yeah.
Just saying. With that said, where people could find me if I'm wrong about something, where can people find you if you're wrong about something, Bob? Where can everybody find you on the World Wide Web?
I don't think I'm ever wrong, right?
That I've said that to a good buddy of mine who I've joked with him. He's been my intern for years. We've worked on a lot of things over the years, and anytime that he questions something of mine, I say, "Can you name a time that I've been wrong?" Now, that's very specific, because I need a specific time that I've been wrong. And of course, nobody can pull that out. Nobody's like, "Oh, like last week at 4:00, you had said that," right? And I say, "Right, you can't." So then I've never been wrong before. So just trust me. So now you can add that to your arsenal. Might not work well at home with Lauren, but it might work well at other situations that you might find yourself in.
I don't know. I don't know, because people know where they can find you and I every Wednesday for an hour time frame. So that
and it's recorded.
Right.
and it's archived.
Right. So that's going to be very difficult for our career, from here on out as prognosticators. But folks, in the meantime, you can follow me personally. I'm on Facebook, Bob Rose. I'm also over on Twitter at BobbyR2613. I publish all of my pieces on my personal pages, but you can also find them on the Saints News Network at Saints News on Twitter, and of course, SI.com, the Sports Illustrated team site where we do all the work, or all the coverage for the New Orleans Saints on SI.com. Right now I'm going to be doing draft profiles like crazy from now through, through the first night of the draft. I've done a lot of film work on defensive players, but because of our network's edition of Ross Jackson, Ross's wheelhouse is kind of the same as mine. So he and I sat down as far as who's going to publish what. So from here on out, when you follow, when you look on the Saints News Network, I'll be doing the offensive, player profiles, draft prospects, and Ross will be doing the defensive ones. But if y'all have any questions about, defensive players, and you follow me, but not Ross for some reason, A, you need to follow Ross too. But B, you can always reach out to me because these black circles under my eyes, they aren't just from watching offensive players. Trust me. Brendan and I have done extensive draft work, which I'm hoping will reflect itself from now, through the 3 nights of the draft, of course.
Well, Bob, for me, you can follow me at on Instagram and Twitter at BT Boylan. Make sure you follow the show on Twitter at Bayou Blitz Pod. We're gonna have more polls. I think one poll that I'm gonna have to add, Bob, is which jersey should be behind me. I think that'll be a fun one. Give you guys some options, let you guys vote what you want to see. But definitely tune into that as we have more polls. We have more information coming out about the show, different guests, different. I don't want to say scheduling conflicts, but obviously with the draft, we're excited to announce we're going to be doing some live draft shows here at the Bayou Blitz. So make sure you're tuning in, making sure you're able to tune in live with us, ask us questions live, have us on your laptop or on your phone while the draft's going on live on your TV. We love being able to do that. Bob and I have done the draft together. Is this 3 or 4 years now?
I think 4. I think at least 4.
So we've been doing the draft together a long time. So it's always a lot of fun. So make sure you tune in there. Make sure you follow Bob, Ross, John, and Kyle with Saints News Network as the draft continues. They're going to have a lot of great coverage, as we will too here at the Bayou Blitz. Well, Bob, it's another good Wednesday. I know you have dark circles. I have dark circles, which tells me it's time for me to go to bed. I know that's not the case for you. You still have at least 4 hours of film to watch, right?
3.
3?
3, yeah.
3. Wow, I was pretty dang close.
Well, I'm getting older, so I have to get that extra hour now.
What did you say? Did you say something? Did you admit something there?
Yeah, well, and I don't know if they'll be ready next week or not, but your boy had his first eye exam in 35 years over the weekend, and you heard that right. First eye exam in 35 years.
That's older than me.
I know, and predictably, I knew I was going to need glasses. I needed glasses when I stopped wearing glasses back in the 10th grade, 35 years ago. And I not only need glasses, I'm going to be wearing bifocals.
Nice.
Yeah, it is really not. It's been a rough 2023 on so many levels for me. So yeah, I mean, my eyesight has not been helped by all this computer work, all this. I don't want to take over the TV from my family, including my 5-year-old. SpongeBob is going to win over NFL film study almost every time. So when he is home, my film study is reduced to however big my phone screen is, not doing wonders for my eyesight.
All right, so this is what's going to happen, guys. We're going to put a GoFundMe up for Bob Rose corduroy jackets and bifocals, and we'll have Professor Bob.
I want the leather patches on the elbows.
Have to, and the shoulders. and the shoulders. We got to go straight like late 80s, early 90s Professor look. And then we could rebrand. We'll make it a brand, the Professor Bob brand. Make t-shirts with like a silhouette of you. Like, yeah, we got a whole marketing scheme now. And if you think I'm kidding at all, Bob, if you see a corduroy jacket show up at your
Bring it
house
on.
for the next couple of weeks,
Bring it on. I will not only wear it on the air with my bifocals, but folks, this is not a hair piece, so it's my real hair. I swear to God, I will find, or I have custom made a Bayou Blitz pipe that I will have in my mouth on the air too.
pipe and everything. Oh man, we got to get you a chalkboard, some chalk. Oh, Professor Bob reporting for duty. DJ says bell bottoms too, so we could get the whole look going. Get the whole look. We're gonna have to make you stand up with a whiteboard or a chalkboard and teach class. Oh, this is gonna be gold. I'm not making fun of you at all. I mean, I'm sure I'll need glass. I can guarantee you. I'd say probably 20 years from now, everybody in my generation at this, like, let's say 20 to 30 range, everybody's going to need glasses because of this, right?
Yeah.
I spend all my workday looking at a screen.
Yeah. All you MFers are going to be blind like me.
Exactly. And now I got to change the program rating, Bob. We almost did it. I can always count on you to throw in something that's borderline, not raunchy. Let's say borderline raunchy. That's a good word. But nonetheless,
I like to toe the line.
No, you like to play jump rope with the line. I do too, though. It's fun. Guys, we thank you so much for hanging out with us.
Yeah.
Hopefully we provided enough Saints news for you this week. Same time, same place next week. We'll see you then for the Bayou Blitz podcast. Until then, find peace, spread love, practice positivity. See you next Wednesday. More Bayou Blitz. See you then.